Byrd Cochrain of Dead Man's Corner by Valerie Owen at the Feather Press in Snyder, October 1972. The dedication: to my dear husband, Don Owen, whose love and patience made this book possible. Introduction. The author is to be commended for her splendid work in producing this book. She records the unique, true-life story of Byrd Jackson Cochrain. This is an unparalleled story filled with pathos and tragedy, but the little rooster rode tall in the saddle during his entire life and never lost his undaunted spirit. His legend in this area. Many embellished and wild tales have developed of his life, but here readers will find duly recorded, documented facts. Before you pass judgment on this hardy pioneer, walk a mile in his boots. Leaving home because of economic necessity before the age of 12, he aided his parents financially through all the years, and they never understood his problems and his way of life. This hurt him deeply. He always yearned to be accepted. In tragic deaths, he lost many close friends, and he underwent hardships almost unbelievable. Byrd Cochrain never took advantage, whether in a gunfight, fisticuffs, or business trade. He was a top cowhand and always gave an honest day's work. He spent his last years on his ranch in Stonewall County between Aspermont and Rotan, and the shadows of Double Mountains and the winding Double Mountain fork of Brazos River. He has a number of descendants in the area who, like Byrd Cochrain, are good, hard-working, responsible citizens. The little rooster had a quick temper, but was truly compassionate. He was devoted to his wife and children, and during his troubles always did his best by them. We are indeed proud of Valerie Owen for this work. Several other people in the past years have made attempts to record this unique story, but vast amounts of research and travel stymied them. This production will no doubt be well received by all who appreciate our pioneers making this country and the way of life possible for those of us who follow. Hooper Shelton. Acknowledgments. Too numerous to mention are the fine folks who have helped me during the past 4 years while this book has been in the research and rewrite department. The author could never take full credit for this labor of love. Byrd Cochrain gave me all his tablets of memoirs that he had written while in prison at Huntsville. While he lived, he patiently spent hours tapping and answering questions for me, though he had long before lost all interest in his story. He never failed to answer my letters, which became a real chore for him at last. My thanks to the following people: Fred Lambert, poet of the Southwest, for his poem Swan Song of the West; Doug Meter for his short epigram, first published in the Matador Tribune; Mrs. Lula Beckham Cates of El Paso, who took me into her home and gave me first-hand information about her uncle, Joe Beckham; the Correjo and Armijo families in Quemodo, New Mexico, who verified Part 3 and the fight at the Cooper Ranch in New Mexico; John Ashton, my dad, who took me to meet Byrd Cochrain. I had heard many tales on him, but didn't dare go alone the first time. For the past 40 years, Cochrain has lived as a legendary figure in Stonewall County. Many furnished old papers, pictures, and dusty records to authenticate this book. Mr. Lemon, deceased; Mr. Charles Moore, of Hewlett, Wyoming; Mr. J.O. Bamble, of Memon, South Dakota; Mrs. Henry Heliff gave information about the Health Ranch; and Mr. H. Campbell, Matador, Texas, helped considerably with the Joe Beckham part. Wayne Earthry talked with me about the fake burial in 1919. Mrs. R.J. Bradley of Seymour, Texas, talked several hours with the author. Mrs. Juanita Powers, the only daughter of Mr. Cochrain's, kindly gave me her time when it was needed. No acknowledgment is complete without giving special mention of the dear ones in the family, without whose help work would have been ceased. My mother, Edna Ashton, kept my children while I made the trips. My husband paid the bills, and my sister, Johnny Blakely of Fisher County, took time out of her busy schedule rearing 3 children and made trips with me, not to mention the typing, collecting of pictures, and Most important, her encouragement and determination that this book should be published. Thanks to all of you. And what I can say to my 4 children who endured me while I worked, Jim, Teresa, Barbie, and baby Donna, just that I love you. Author Valerie Ashton Owen was born in 1930 at Roten, Texas, daughter of John and Edna Ashton. In 1952, she moved to Dallas and was employed with Chance Vaught as secretary to the night superintendent, enabling her to work 40 hours a week and attend college. The author received her Bachelor of Science in 1956 from North Texas State University. At an early age, she became interested in writing lovely, heartwarming poems on all subjects. Younger members of her family well remember her as the storyteller. Before TV days, when children gathered, she entertained, forming her stories as she went along. After teaching in Irving Public Schools for several years, Valerie retired to what she considers the best calling of all, a homemaker for her husband and 4 children. Her only son has since married, leaving 3 girls at home, Teresa, Barbie, and Donna. The author has had several short stories and some religious material published, and plans to devote more time to writing Christian material and teaching the Bible. She attends the First Baptist Church in Irving with her family. In brief interview, we found no sense of false humility on any of her accomplishments. She said, "I do not have time to remember any of life's disappointments, and do not believe in it anyway. I have always had a positive attitude and seldom allow myself discouragement. God has his mighty hand on all of us. I love the memories of my childhood when children walked nearly everywhere. I love West Texas sunsets and cool breezes. To me, the West is grandeur and color, alive with history, and the genteel kind of folk I like to remember as friends." Foreword. Byrd Cochrain, represented the passing of an era of Western Americana, succumbed to the same spirit of adventure that gave his grandfather, Henry Byrd Cochrain, courage to leave his native Ireland and head for a land he had only read about. Alone and armed only with an ample supply of ambition, Henry Byrd washed dishes for passage to New York. Then he worked his way on to Pike County, Missouri, where he later married Hannah B. Houston. The couple moved by wagon to Montague County, Texas, where on May 25, 1856, their youngest son, Stephen Byrd, was born. They had 4 boys and 2 girls. Inherent adventure was the common denominator between grandfather and grandson, as it was with all new settlers flooding into the Southwest. It turned out to be anything but the promised land, with harrowing Indian raids to keep families in constant fear for their lives, blizzards in the winter, and droughts in the summer, and swarms of grasshoppers eat away newly planted crops. Stephen Byrd Cochrain married Mattie Crowley. They had 2 girls, Emma and Mandy. Mattie and Baby died from a fever which ravaged the land when the child was but a few weeks old. Mandy died years later in childbirth. Stephen then married Cordelia Louisa McGuire, and to that union were born 11 children, of whom Byrd Jackson Cochrain was the eldest. He was born October 5, 1883, in Montague County, Texas, in a dugout 6 miles east of Bowie. In 1885, Stephen Byrd sold his land there and moved on to Wilbarger County, Texas. The Fort Worth and Denver was being built in Wilbarger, which brought about the establishment of Harold, Texas, on the head of the Chimney Creek, a tributary of Red River. The Cochrains eventually settled on the dividing line between Wilbarger and Wichita counties. Fort Worth had been then built vast shipping pens to accommodate the cowmen of the West who preferred to ship their cattle instead of driving them to the northern and eastern markets. The country was still mostly open range, west and north, almost to the city limits of Kansas City, but the time was fast in coming when barbed wire would change all that. In 1890, there was very little free grass. Big syndicates had bought up miles of acres of land in Texas and posted it as private. Dan Wagoner used to brand his cattle and then cut them out for market right in the heart of which is now Wichita Falls, Texas. 3 miles east of Wichita Falls, around 1879, Wagoner set up his small ranch headquarters using D71 as his brand. He purchased an empire. Eventually, he owned some 500,000 acres in Baylor and Wilbarger counties. In 1881, he changed the D71 brand to DDD. In Wilbarger County, Stephen Byrd purchased about 640 acres of land from the state of Texas on Long Creek, on the old Chisholm Trail. He turned his small herd loose and began hauling in lumber to build a dugout. He dug 4 feet into the ground, built up the walls 4 feet higher with straight logs, and put up a pole in the center, covered it with split logs, then covered it with dirt. He cut a window on each side of the log wall and built a fireplace and a chimney on one end door of the other. Since he was taught school a short time in Grayson County, Texas, word got around that he was asked to teach children of the 8 families living in the community. When T.L. Shelton, who came from Stoneburg, Texas, moved from his little log cabin in 1882, Tom Parks used it for a schoolhouse. Then a Reverend Powell taught a subscription school there. In 1885, Beaver Creek Schoolhouse was built, and Mr. Cochrain began to teach in it. Today, that little school has been moved up the road and is known as the Beaver Creek Memorial. When the school closed, the Cottonwood School was built up closer to the Cochrain home. Mrs. Cochrain was in poor health due to the rapidly growing family. It became necessary for Mr. Cochrain to be near his home to help her. When his own health began to fail, many hard chores were placed upon the oldest children. This land was poor, dotted here and there with mesquite thickets. As cows drifted, and cowboys driving herds on west and north into Oklahoma didn't take time to cut out a nester's little bunch of milk cows. Times were indeed hard for the handful of settlers. Mr. Cochrain taught in the winter, and farming in the spring depended on help from his neighbors. What schooling little Byrd got came from the sincere efforts of his dad, who tried to instill in his son the importance of good education. To ensure correct dates and events, the author searched many old, dusty records, made trips, interviewed, and corresponded for 4 years in her efforts to have all fact and no fiction. This is the story of a man who, through necessity, left his home just before he turned 12 to help support an ever-increasing family. It is the story of a man ever searching, ever longing to find love and acceptance, never longing to see what was just around the bend. And like his father and grandfather before him, he took great pride in helping shape the destiny of this new land. Though I had heard stories about Byrd Jackson Cochrain all my life, it wasn't until the fall of 1965 that I finally met him. That may seem ironic, since I grew up no more than 35 miles from his ranch, and had heard grown-ups talk of the West Texas legendary figure as if he were someone to steer clear of. He had received a great deal of publicity when in 1919 he pulled off a fake burial and disappeared. The scheme might have worked had his wife not collected close to $10,000 worth of insurance while he was in hiding. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, served his time, then came back to Stonewall County, Texas, where he settled down on a ranch, and to his death he lived as independently of his loved ones and neighbors as he did when he was a young man on the move. Attorneys interested in this case stated to the press that there had never been another parallel case in any of the court records. In the old days, the main highway, unpaved, from Peacock, Texas to Rotan, Texas, ran by his home. After he placed his tombstone, which had been used at the fake burial, in his front yard, the place became known as Dead Man's Corner. And because of his quick temper and readiness to fight in the old days, he became known as the Little Rooster from Dead Man's Corner. I went to his ranch accompanied by my dad, John Aston, and his sister, Johnny Blakely, hardly daring to imagine what type of person I would meet. I wanted to get a story on Mr. Cochrain as the last of the old-time cowboys. Dad had assured me that in spite of the wild tales I had heard about the Little Rooster, he was a nice man to know. I remember passing by his old ranch house when I was in my early teens and seeing the tombstone in his front yard. Besides the strange stories I heard about this pretended burial, I'd heard wild stories about his wandering down in old Mexico where he hunted Yaqui gold. Grew up believing he had gold hid in tin cans in his backyard. I found Mr. Cochrain nothing like what I expected. He had done a great deal of writing on his own, and handed over a cardboard box full of notes written on old tablets, newspapers, clippings, and valuable pictures. Added to that, he had a storehouse of recollections in his head to tell me. Many sunsets later, the soft-spoken gentleman with a J. Frank Dobie appearance remained a salty representative of old-time breed, with his bowed legs and genteel ways around the womenfolk. With a sense of history he often expressed during his labor of love, his regret over passing of his kind, it seemed only logical to have Byrd Jackson Cochrain tell his story as he lived in it, for he loved those times so well. Now, look down the dusty trail of time with his cowboy following him from his boyhood onto the open range to his prison days and after. Fewer memories are clear to an old-timer than those of his loneliness.